Water is one of society's most precious resources. Clean, fresh drinking water is essential to human life. Although access to safe drinking water has improved steadily over the last decades in every part of the world, some observers have estimated that by 2025, more than half of the world population will be facing water shortages. In Kerr County, water is not only vital to survival, it is also an economic factor. The Guadalupe River, with its headwaters in Kerr County, is a popular tourist attraction, a source of water for agriculture and recreation, as well as providing drinking water. Kerr County and a large region of the state of Texas get their water from the Guadalupe River and the Edwards Trinity Aquifer. Recent studies have shown that the ability of these sources to continue to supply adequate amounts of quality water to the region is being heavily taxed. Most projections show that unless we can both limit our consumption of groundwater and increase recharge to the aquifers, water usage demand will not be met. This film will investigate one method of affecting the water supply: habitat and range management. Specifically, the control of the Ashe juniper species of tree, known locally as the cedar tree. The current landscape of the hill country is almost inundated with cedar, but it hasn't always been this way. When the hill country was settled by European man in the mid-1800s, it was maintained as a grassland savanna thanks to grazing habits of bison and antelope, as well as by frequent natural and man-made fires. The land supported a rich diversity of forbs and grasses. Cedar was restricted to overgrazed areas along rivers and streams, and in areas of shallow soils and steep canyons where fires did not occur frequently. But with European settlement came fences, cows, sheep, goats, and the control of fire. Donnie Frells is the project leader for the Kerr Wildlife Management Area, a 6,500-acre wildlife management area located in West Kerr County. The Kerr WMA provides an ecological refuge for native plants and animals, providing a venue for research and education in wildlife habitat management. Frells is employed by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and heads up operations at the Kerr Wildlife Management Area.
So what we see as we come up through the early 1900s is a change in the landscape here. What it looked like was a whole lot different than what it looks like today.
Bill Armstrong is an award-winning conservationist, biologist, researcher, and educator. He spent most of his career with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department as a biologist, studying and managing wildlife, grazing systems, prescribed fire, brush control, endangered species, and ecosystem management. Mr. Armstrong has served on numerous boards and committees involved with wildlife and the environment, including the Board of Directors of the Texas section of the Wildlife Society, the Board of Directors for the Texas section of the Range Society, and currently serves on the Texas Parks and Wildlife White-tailed Deer Advisory Committee. Mr. Armstrong is now a range improvement specialist, designing and conducting prescribed burns in the hill country.
European man comes in around 1840, 1850. He begins to say fire is bad. He begins to overgraze the land and the country began to change.
We had lightning strikes back then, or Indians would set fires, and these things were horrific wildfires, not like what we see today. We think we have bad wildfires today, but historically speaking, a lightning strike would hit, and those fires would burn for days and weeks. Winds would shift. Now that fire would move a whole different way and burn maybe hundreds of thousands of acres. There was nothing to stop it but natural barriers at that time.
And the country underwent a dramatic change from 1900 to about 1940. We went from that grassland to a brushland. To by 1940, we were primarily a solid cedar brake.
Ashe juniper had spread from the steep draws and canyons and exploited the uplands. In much of the hill country, cedar became the dominant plant species, causing a once diverse and healthy landscape to become a cedar brake with very little plant diversity or vigor. This transformation to woodland may have reduced water available for recharge and stream flow. Ashe juniper has been thoroughly researched and has been found in study after study to be a plant that uses large quantities of water through evapotranspiration.
Cedar's kind of a primitive tree in that in the bottom of a leaf, if you can think back to your 7th grade science classes, there's little holes in the bottom of the leaf, and they're called stomata. And they have little cells on each side of the hole that open and close and control the moisture in a leaf. Cedar has that, but it's kind of primitive and it kind of leaks. So it's, compared to more modern plants, it's pretty inefficient in the way it handles water. So it leaks a lot of water. If you've ever been in a cedar break in the summertime, you know it's a lot more humid than if you get out of that cedar break. So it's fairly inefficient in water. It has a fairly dense canopy, so that when it does rain, a lot of moisture is collected in that canopy and it evaporates back out. A lot of research has shown that you need over a ½ inch of rain before you even get water to the ground underneath a solid cedar area. Even though you were in a 30-inch rainfall belt, you may effectively only have 9 to 18 inches of rainfall, so you were effectively in a desert if you had brush canopy that was intercepting that rainfall and putting it back into the ground. Most of your rainfall events are less than a ½ inch. Very few of them, comparatively speaking, get to be that 2-3 inch level.
A single ash juniper tree can transpire approximately 550 gallons per day. As much as 40% of the precipitation that falls on a juniper tree is intercepted by the canopy and lost to evaporation. As a consequence, in an area that receives 30 inches of annual rainfall, a mature juniper tree will intercept and transpire nearly all of the available water falling within its canopy. This interception and transpiration is detrimental to other nearby plants. The growth habit of cedar lends itself to intercepting large quantities of water that never become available to other plants. Not only does the ash juniper deprive neighboring organisms of sufficient water, it also shades other plants to the point where they simply will not grow. Complicating the matter, ash juniper is a highly undesirable forage plant avoided by both domestic livestock and deer. The spread of ash juniper to today's levels is not a natural phenomenon.
But cedar is an indication that your system is out of balance. Something isn't right in that system because it should not be here in the density that we see it today.
When the environment becomes significantly different from how it existed before the influence of man, we must consider how best to encourage the reversion to the norm. When left to spread on its own, cedar quickly becomes the dominant species. Controlling cedar is a step towards correcting the imbalance that is present in today's hill country landscape. Reducing the numbers of ash juniper will not only return the land to its more natural and beneficial environmental state, it will also provide groundwater recharge and water flows to increase stream flow.
But now think about the water cycle. Now as a raindrop hits the ground, it's not intercepted by a cedar tree anymore and used up. It's hitting the ground, it's going back into the aquifer. You've created a sponge layer there with all those roots and that root system there.
When a grass grows, the height of the grass above the ground, you probably have an equal amount of root system under the ground. Then over time, what you begin to do, put that organic matter back into the ground. And that's going to capture your water and slow its runoff, put some of it back into the aquifer, maybe some springs might sprout up a ½ mile away.
And now your water cycle is also improved. And that's a difficult thing is to make sure that people understand that there are aquatic systems and there are terrestrial systems, but they're linked. And what happens on those terrestrial systems, on those watersheds, is very important to those aquatic systems, whether it's rivers or it's aquifers. It's the watershed that's important and the shape that watershed is in.
Several methods of cedar control are available to landowners today, each with their own benefits and challenges. Landowners can use hand clearing, bulldozers, mulching machines, cedar shears, and fire. All of these methods may be used individually or can be combined, with different methods being more or less appropriate for different types of terrain and topography. Cedar shearing has been the method of choice for one landowner, Mr. Jack Clark of Kerr County. Mr. Clark owns land on Johnson Creek, one of the tributaries to the Guadalupe River. Years ago, the Clarks had a spring in this valley that flowed down to Johnson Creek. In recent years, however, the spring has gone almost completely dry. As you can see here, the once flowing spring has been reduced to a trickle. Mr. Clark believes that the spread of thick cedar on the above hillside caused the spring to go dry, and he is now clearing cedar to try to revive the spring. Whether or not the spring becomes active again, Mr. Clark will have succeeded in improving the landscape on his property. After the cedar is cleared, more water will be available to other plant species, and once the grass recovers and takes hold, the biological material in the ground will act as a sponge to hold rainfall and return much more water to the aquifer and nearby streams. Studies have compared the differences in water usage between rangeland grasses and ash juniper, and have shown that in areas cleared of juniper, water lost to evaporation were 1.6 inches per acre per year less than areas with intact juniper. Some other recent work estimates that evapotranspiration rates may be as much as 3.5 inches per acre per year higher for juniper woodlands than compared to grasslands on the same site. Based on current research, the best estimate is that converting 5 to 8 acres of juniper to rangeland would result in an approximate increase in recharge and stream flow of 1 acre-foot of water per year. Over the next 50 years, Texas will continue to face an ever-increasing demand for a limited resource: fresh water. Understanding the influence of vegetation and vegetation management on the performance of the water cycle can help us augment freshwater supplies for South Central Texas. Brush management, specifically ash juniper management, represents a cost-effective strategy to increase available water.